A warm welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on Dublin City FM 103.2. Each week we have an expert from the world of business sharing their knowledge, insights and tips to help you reduce costs, increase profits and drive efficiency. If there's a topic that you would like covered, or if you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie and perhaps we'll be chatting here one day soon. Today's guest, I'm delighted to have. She's the owner and founder of Smart Sales Hub, is co-founder of the Northeast Business Academy, and is a council member at Newry Chamber of Commerce and Trade. Wow, I'm delighted to welcome to the studio Caroline Courtney. Caroline, welcome to the You and Your Business studio.
Thank you very much for inviting me along, Alec.
Yeah.
I'm delighted to be here this morning.
Yes, it's a strange morning. We lots of things going on, and you've spent 25 years in sales, and for any business, sales are the core to driving profits.
Absolutely. If you don't have sales, you don't have a business. And, quite often businesses will put sales on the back burner. They'll think about branding, they'll think about marketing, and they just sit back and wait for the sales to come in. And that's absolutely not the way to do it. Sales should be the driving force within any business, small or large.
And you've worked with a wide range of businesses from, small right the way up to large corporates. Can you give me some of the ideas of some of the key mistakes that sometimes businesses make when it comes to putting in place the right sort of sales?
I think really in terms of sales in business that the one thing that people need to do is think very differently about the sales approach. And quite often we associate salespeople with those sort of typical car salespeople who are trying to sell for commission, and they'd sell their granny for commission, as people used to say in the old days. And selling has very much changed in the last 10, 20 years. And we don't sell products or services anymore. What we actually do is sell solutions. So if you think about what the outcome will be for the customer or the client, and you can sell the vision of that outcome, it's much easier to actually sell your product or service, because people emotionally engage and they imagine that that's what's going to happen when they engage with your product or service. So if you think about the dieting industry, they don't say, let's come to the gym for 10 weeks and work really hard on the treadmill. They say, bikini body in 6 weeks. Would you like that? And immediately everybody gets bought into the end result. And that's how they sell gym memberships. So if we use that aspect in all our businesses, regardless if it's B2B or B2C, people will engage with us more readily.
Oh, fantastic. And I don't quite see myself in a bikini.
Not this time of year, anyway.
Certainly not. No, but it's fascinating because, as you said, we see so often the hard sales approach.
Yes.
And there's a reaction. We have a reaction to that all the time. What's in us that sort of puts us off straight away, do you think?
Well, I learned many years ago, it was one line and it stuck with me for many years. It's sell for a need and not for greed. And too many salespeople are out there pitching, selling, always be closing. You hear all of this sort of philosophy. It really doesn't work. And immediately people will put the barriers up when you're trying to sell and pitch to them in that way. I always think it's very important that when you're dealing with the customers that you create an awareness and a want in them that they will actually lean forward to you, and then you lean to them and you meet in the middle. So it's very much a mutual business relationship in that sense, that both people can see a positive outcome, as opposed to very much sort of you're in charge, the customer needs you, or vice versa. So when you can get them to lean forward, the sale is always much easier.
Yeah, and that's a great way of looking at it, and dealing with the needs. I mean, it should be very much a relationship built on trust. And trust, I think, is a key part of selling.
Absolutely. I mean, we are actually officially living in what's known as the post-trust era. So since the financial crash of 2008, consumers and people around the world now are of the mindset that they do not believe the institutions, the banks, the companies, because they feel they've been fed a lot of lies, there's been distrust going on. So selling has changed dramatically in the last 10, 15 years. The first thing you've got to do is build trust and build a relationship. And I always put sales in a relationship like it's a bit like dating. If you go on a first date with somebody, you don't ask them to marry them that night, but yet some salespeople will go straight in for the sale on the first meeting with a customer or a client, and then straight away the defence mechanism goes up and you've lost that opportunity to build a very valuable and maybe long-term business relationship. It's gone.
Yeah, it's funny like that. I was talking to somebody there also in sales, and they'd said to me, you never go home and say to your partner, oh, somebody sold me this. it's always a decision you made, or at least you need to feel that you have made that decision yourself.
Yeah, I think it's important to lead people and guide them in the right way, and teach them how this product would benefit them. And I always say to people, if the product or service is not right for the customer, don't push it onto them, because typically women go into a boutique or a dress shop and a sales lady comes up and says, oh, that's lovely on you, you should buy that, and you buy it reluctantly, and you go home and think, I'm never going into that shop again, because you were forced. And the amount of people that you will tell, if you've had that experience, be it in a car showroom, be it in an electrical retailer, whatever the situation is, if you are sold to like that and you have a bad feeling, you will tell so many people. And obviously with the modern day, with social media, and the online implications can be huge for a business if you've really been forced to buy a product or service that you weren't 100% committed to. People will go and leave reviews, and once your new potential clients will see that sort of information being left, detrimental to your reputation.
I mean, from your own perspective, obviously in sales 25 years, you've seen a seismic shift in the way people are interacting with companies and buying goods and services. Social media, how big a part is social media really playing in terms of company reputation these days?
Well, social media, and actually you look at, talk about sales funnels, sales and marketing funnels, it has completely inverted from what it used to be. Many years ago, you had a little bit of marketing, and then you had pushing, selling, closing, doing the deal. And it's completely reversed in the sense that probably 70% of the build-up now is the marketing, the awareness, the branding, and then only when you go and see your customer, you do a small bit of the end. It's not even called closing anymore. It's asking for commitment, because it feels less pressurised for people. And the interesting fact is that people know more about your product or service before you ever speak to them, because your brand is out there. People can Google, they can go online, they can find out so much more about your business before they ever interact with you. And the traditional sales method would say between the 7th and the 12th point of contact you have with the client before they potentially think about engaging or buying your product. So if you think about that, all of the social media aspects, all of the websites, Facebook pages, Instagram, whatever your product is, they're seeing your brand and product so many more times before you ever get to speak with them. So it's important that you're putting the right message out there, because if they feel the message is not coherent with their thinking, they will never engage with your company.
It's quite interesting. You've raised a point that I think a lot of people tend to forget in business these days, that the amount of research people will do on a product before they'll even approach you about yours. So the fact that of the old traditional way of selling, where you're trying to talk about the benefits of a particular product, the client already, or potential client already, knows about this.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, some people liken it to the old, they used to say the insurance travelling rep, where he called on the door and he knocked at the household and they collected the money, the Irish Life, those sort of guys, yes, many years ago. He told you what you needed to know about the product or the life insurance that you were buying. Okay. Nowadays, if you're going to buy life insurance, you will research every provider on the market. You will know who the top ones are, and you will decide which one you ring. And when you ring and speak to their salespeople or their customer service advisors, you will have probably made up your mind before you even engage with them whether or not you're going to buy or purchase from them. And all that they're really doing is affirming your own thoughts. So we all process thoughts in our own way, and we've made our minds up very much before we go into the shop or into the business to actually purchase at the last moment. Whereas many years ago, it was very much, you could have walked into a business, you didn't really think about the product, and before you knew it, you would come out with the product. Consumers are not like that anymore. They've got their mind made up.
That's quite an interesting psychology change in the way people are buying things, because, for example, when people went in before, they had no knowledge, so therefore you had to brief them up on the particular product or service. So it was a complete sort of briefing part of it. Then they had to assimilate that information, go and speak to maybe other competitors of yours to try and get a similar understanding, and then you were into the kind of sales process. Whereas now what you're really saying is that a lot of that donkey work has been done for you, in the sense that if somebody's approaching you about something, it shows they've already got an interest in that offering that you've got.
Yes, absolutely. It's much more of a warmer lead, if you want to call it that, for want of a word. When people come and approach your company, they've done a little bit of research. They know they're in the market for that product or service, and really they're now deciding which provider or which service or company will actually provide that. The other thing is, we still do need to sell to customers in a sense that they have a vague idea of what they want, but sometimes we really need to listen to what they're saying. I'll give you a really good example. A hardware store many years ago, a gentleman came in and he said, I need a cheap garden hose. And the guy on the counter said, oh, okay, why is that then? Well, because it freezes up every year. I leave it outside, or my wife doesn't bring it in the winter. It freezes, and every year we throw it in the bin and we have to buy a new one. Now, in theory, you would think, well, what that guy's saying, yes, he just needs a cheap garden hose. But in reality, what that customer is actually saying is, I am buying a solution every year that is not, I'm buying a product, that is not providing a solution for me. So a typical salesperson that isn't really thinking outside of the box will say, fine, there's the cheap hoses in aisle number 4 or whatever. Really, we need to train our staff to think differently, to sell better solutions to customers. So in that instance, what the sales guy will do is say, look, I've actually got an insulated hose. It costs about €20 more. It's guaranteed for 5 years. It's it won't freeze, etc., etc. So all of a sudden, you're providing a better solution. The customer has actually spent more money, but he's bought a better product that will last for 5 years. So if you think about it, customers to an extent do know what they want, but they also need to be led to get the right solution for their problem. So that's two very different outcomes of a similar problem. So in sales, we really need to listen to customers and provide the best solution for them.
I think that's very important, because I think as humans, we're all very keen to talk. And really, we stop listening because we're waiting to get the next point out that we're busy and thinking about, and just trying to get it out there. But you've identified something very important, the importance of listening in sales.
Absolutely. Selling is 70% listening and 30% talking. And, you know, the old saying many years ago, people would say anybody who's a chatty sort of person is, oh, you'd be very good in sales. You could talk the hind legs of a donkey, or whatever the saying is. In fact, that's absolutely wrong. The old saying, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so use it in that order. When you actually listen to customers and listen to their needs and ask the right questions as well, you will hear the answers.
Yeah, and that's amazing, because you need to make the space available. So there is a skill set around that. Obviously, there's training available for people. Tell me a bit about what sort of sales training is good. That if organisations are looking to set their sales teams out, what should they be looking for from a training point of view, or the sort of offering that's coming from some sort of trainer out there?
Yes, well, first of all, I cannot highly recommend training in business of any type, be it sales or, you know, whatever the business you're in. It can be sales, it could be marketing. Training is vitally important for every business and organisation. And to quote Henry Ford, he says, the only thing worse than training your employees and have them leave is not training them and have them stay. So if you think about that, it's really important. You're much better to have good employees, train them, and there's so many huge benefits to sales training in particular. I mean, obviously, the first very obvious benefit would be that it increases your sales. And that sounds, you know, pretty obvious. But people forget there are lots of other benefits as well when you engage with sales training within your company. I mean, for example, sales training increases motivation. So when staff are brought in, you spend money on them, you invest in your people, they get an increase in motivation, they get the buy-in to the company cares about me, they've invested in this training, they're helping me achieve my commissions and earn more money. Now, what other way is there to motivate a salesperson than actually help them make more money? You know, that's really important. The other benefit of sales training would be increased retention of staff. As we all know, it's difficult to get the right staff. And when you have the good staff, you don't want them leaving. So by investing in them in terms of sales training, they really will, again, the buy-in to the company, they're going to stay. It's going to cost you much more to replace an employee than to invest in training. And most businesses and CEOs will say, you know, when you have to replace a good, valuable member of staff, it takes a minimum of 6 months, really, before you see the investment returned on the new member of staff. So that's a huge loss to a business in terms of increase in sales or retention of existing sales if it takes you 6 months to replace one person. So that's a huge benefit as well. The other benefit in sales training is actually decrease in costs. And most people look at training and investment as a cost, but actually by doing the training, you can decrease your costs, because what you're doing is you're helping and training your staff to work more efficiently and therefore, you know, plan their routes better, think differently in their sales role, and that will in effect actually decrease costs. Lost opportunities. People talk about sales they've won. What is the cost to a business of lost opportunities? So by having that sales training or any training within a business, you should lose less opportunities. Another very good advantage to sales training would be an increased buy-in from staff. You know, your employees and staff can be either your ambassadors or they can be, you know, somebody who absolutely destroys your business. And I've seen over the years people working for big companies saying, I hate my job, I hate my boss, I hate what I do. I mean, that is totally an assassin for a business. When you invest in your employees and you train, they're going to love their job more, they're going to engage better, they're going to buy in, they're going to understand what the business is about, and they're really going to get behind it. And negative impact like that should diminish or be very little. And another good thing about sales training is the increase with the alignment of the company and the employee goals. Now, quite often employees have a mindset of what they want to see out of the job, and the employee will have a mindset of the employer will have a mindset on what they want to see. But quite often they don't align. Sometimes when you bring a neutral trainer into the business, they can spot things and they can report back, because it's very much honest feedback when a neutral person comes in. It's a bit like when you're dealing with a family member, you might make a comment just to pass yourself, not to upset or offend anybody. And similarly in business, when you have a neutral person who's advising or training, you will get honest feedback from both sides, and whereby you can obviously alleviate if there are any problems within that. So you get huge benefits.
If you're just joining us now, you're listening to me, Alec Drew, on Dublin City 103.2 FM, where my studio guest today is Caroline Courtney from the company, Caroline?
It's a Smart Sales Hub.
And your web address?
It's www.smartsaleshub.com.
Fantastic. And we're talking about sales here. One of the most important and vital lifelines to any business is the importance of sales. And we've just been talking a bit about training. I'm always fascinated. As you said, people tend to regard training as a cost as opposed to an investment. Have you any other suggestions around where people should source good trainers for doing this type of work?
Well, I personally believe that personal referrals is very important, because if you've actually engaged with a company and you've worked with them and you have a good relationship, they will always refer you. So it's always important to get referrals from other people. Obviously, there are lots of training providers and suppliers out there, lots of research, but, do your own research and work with people that you feel comfortable with and that understand your business, and particularly that have a niche in that area of business that you work, because not everybody will niche in the area that you may want. For example, I work with B2B businesses very much, so I wouldn't work with clients or customers in a B2C area, because that's
Sure.
a very different sell. Do your research and make sure you're comfortable doing the training with the person that you've chosen. Lots of people available to do that.
Okay, if you're going to engage a sales training company, what should you expect in terms of how they respond? I mean, I suppose a lot of people will come along and just give you a broad thing. Our sales are not great at the moment. What can you do? What's your sort of approach to?
I think, first of all, you need to look at the business and ask, why are your sales not good? I mean, in what stage in the sales process are you falling down? So quite often when I engage with a client, they'll say, we get lots of inquiries, they don't seem to go anywhere. So straight away you'll say, okay, the follow-up isn't good. Some people will say, I get lots of inquiries, I follow them up, but they seem to die a death. So they're not keeping the momentum, they're not keeping the contact. It may be a long-term sale. If you think of certain industries, it could be 6 months from the day you meet somebody to the day they actually purchase a product. So what's happened there is they've lost the communication from first engagement. So it's really important to keep that connection going. Other customers will say to me, look, we can get the leads, we can actually bring them to a final meeting, but we can't close the sale. So again, you need to look at the process. How are you going about closing the sale? What are the guys or girls saying that's stopping the customer from proceeding? Is it a price issue? Is it a competitor issue? So there's lots of reasons and different analogies in business that would be stopping people from selling. And quite often people actually just don't follow up on leads. They're not consistent. I mean, I work with a lot of clients and they say, we've rang that guy, we can't get him, and they just move on. I say, don't stop until you get a no, or you actually get to speak to the person and they agree to see you. Because quite often, not everybody's ready to buy when you're ready to sell. And I think that's a very important point to make in sales. Quite a lot of salespeople get very demotivated if somebody says no. They're not saying no to you personally per se. They're saying no to you right now, or you're offering right now, but they may not be saying no forever. So it's important to revisit those contacts and referrals, because they may be ready in time. So a lot of people move on and forget about those leads. You need to go back to them and revisit them regularly.
You mentioned that there's a certain number of sort of touch points you have to make to often. On average, what's the expectation these days?
They say between the 5th and the 12th point of contact.
Wow, so you
huge
need
amount.
to stick into it.
Yeah, so most people give up after the second or third phone call. So if you think about it, there's a huge amount of potential business not being fully investigated. Now, don't get me wrong, there are people, and when they say no, they mean no, and that's fine. And I really don't like salespeople who badger people. And I think it's always better and almost to get to know as quickly as you can, because if you know that they're not interested, well, that's fine. You don't need to ring them again or contact them, but you can move on to more potentially valuable clients and you can leave them to themselves. They may come back to you in time, but yes, the 5th to the 12th point of contact before people are ready.
I think that's a very valuable piece of information for people out there to listen to, and for our listeners to just understand that you need to be in for the long haul for a lot of people.
Yes.
If I was to have my way, I must say, I've been in business myself for quite a long time. I suppose the frustration I have is that people won't make a decision. And so you're left making those continuous contacts instead of saying, no, we don't want to buy it. B, we'll come back in 6 months and we'll review it. But giving you some sort of definitive answer, it seems to be part of, is this in every sort of culture, or is it just Ireland that we see?
I think it's in most businesses. And also some important fact to make is sometimes you're not actually dealing with the decision maker. And quite often they can send you around the houses with answers because they're not really sure. They don't want to say no. They don't actually have the buying power. So it's really important as a business owner, when your sales staff are out, looking for business and looking for leads, to make sure you're dealing with the purchaser or the person who has the decision making factor, because quite often you're just wasting time, knocking on doors that are never going to open opportunities because it's the wrong person you're targeting.
So this is quite obviously about doing your homework as well, which is very, very important in terms of the sales process. Now, so many people just don't do their homework.
Yes, I mean, customers are now doing their homework on us, so we equally need to do our homework on a potential client. And, one of the biggest fads in businesses, you talk to small business owners or any size business and they say, who is your ideal client? And they say, everybody. I sell, whatever it is, a restaurant, everybody is my client. And I say, everybody is not your client. Your client is typically aged 35 to 45. They've got an income of 30,000 plus. They probably don't have children. They socialise a lot. They have a desire for fine Italian wine, whatever it happens to be. So it's very important to define your ideal client for your offering, because you'll get rid of a lot of the noise. You'll direct your marketing and your sales approach to people who are in that right frame of mind, who are considering your product or service.
Wow. If you're just joining us now, you're listening to me, Alec Drew, on Dublin City FM 103.2, where my studio guest is Caroline Courtney of Smart Sales Hub. And we're talking about that very, very important part of all businesses. We're talking about sales. Well, we're getting some fantastic insights here. Decision makers, we've just talked and covered. Let me ask you this, again, from your 25 years in sales and training. Barriers. What are the sort of barriers that companies are putting up in relation to their own sales staff that are not helping them achieve their true potential?
Well, there are various barriers I think employers will put up with their staff. Obviously, the first one is if they're not capable and they're put in the wrong job, they don't have enough training of the product or service. Maybe unrealistic expectations as well. Quite a lot of people think it's a matter of lifting the phone, one appointment with a client, and you get the business. And it's simply not that easy. You've got to build a relationship. It takes time, and you have to be realistic about the outcome and what the volume of sales or product tends to be. And quite often in a consumer environment, you will see there's a high volume, low value sale. Whereas if you go into something like construction or engineering or architects, it's very much a long sell where you could be 6 months working with a client to get one sale. So we need to set realistic expectations of salespeople.
Yeah, that's fantastic. The other thing too, which I've come across, it's amazing, a lot of great salespeople don't make great sales managers.
Well, I think you're coming at it from a very different aspect, because a lot of salespeople are customer facing and they enjoy, I suppose, the chase of the sale, the dealing with the customer and the getting the deal. A sales manager is a very different role, whereby you've got to manage people, you've got to set the expectations, and you have to, maybe sometimes have conversations that are difficult. So it's a very different role. So not all salespeople will automatically make a good sales manager.
That's right. Again, speaking with people on the ground, I've discovered that they hate all the sort of things that are put there, like having to fill in expense receipts and all of the nitty-gritty stuff that's not really into the sales. I mean, They're very much into that. Have you found solutions to kind of help businesses mitigate against that?
Well, I suppose there's lots of different digital technologies and apps now that can help you with those sort of things. But I really think, having worked with many different organisations over the years, salespeople are good at selling. Let them do their job. Let them get on with selling. Don't put them in an accountant's type role, expenses, all the paperwork. That's not their game and that's not what they're good at. Focus them on their strengths. And if necessary, if somebody else has to come behind and do the paperwork, so be it. Why have a valuable deal closer sitting in an office for 2 hours filling in expense sheets when they could be out doing 10,000, 20,000 euro deals?
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're getting people to do administrative work where they're trained and skilled to do something much more.
Let them focus on their strengths.
Yeah, and it's amazing. So many organisations don't tend to realise that, but that's the way we always did. So that's the way, and we've got a complete new world out there. I was fascinated you were saying that people tend to forget also that salespeople are ambassadors for the company.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, when you deal with a client, you are the forward-facing person. Quite often, even in the businesses I've worked with over the years, you are the only person that they ever meet face-to-face, depending on the product and service, of course, but a lot of it will be done face-to-face meetings with the salesperson or the area manager, and then the follow-up will come in terms of delivery of product or service. It'll come, you know, a delivery or a courier or whatever it happens to be, but you are the ambassador for that company. So it's really important to create that right impression, to create that good relationship, whereby even I've seen over the years where people would ring me and ask me, and it wasn't even my area of product or service, who would you recommend within the industry? So you've built that trust with them that they're actually even asking your opinion for something outside of your own industry specific. And that's where the return really comes with building relationships with customers. You become their trusted advisor and they will come to you and ask the questions, and there are where the golden opportunities arise.
So in essence, what you're doing is you're putting yourself at the centre of a circle of influence. And so therefore they regard you as a trusted advisor, which you've said. I think that's fantastic. That obviously gives you a head start on anybody else who may be pitching into the...
Yes, I often say that when you're dealing with a customer and you have a good relationship, if a competitor comes along and offers a similar offering, and even if it's a cheaper in terms of price solution, if the relationship is strong, you will hold on to that business. And that makes the difference in a business succeeding and businesses turning over and closing down, because there's always going to be a cheaper competitor. There's always going to be somebody offering something similar to, you know, the quick buck, get in, set the business, get the volume of sales up, but they're not going to be able to consistently offer that service for the long term. And any businesses I work with, we say, we're here for the long haul. Let's invest in this quality relationship and let's see it grow.
Wow. And I suppose it makes sense then, because as you said, with digital technology and things changing at such a rate of pace, that training should be ongoing, sort of reviewed every so often.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the biggest stumbling blocks I see within the sales industry, a lot of salespeople who have been in the business for so many years think, I know everything there is to know about sales. And they don't want to accept that possibly they might need some training or updating of skills. All of us need to be trained and updated in whatever area of business we work in, because if you stay the same, you're actually going backwards. So you need to keep fresh and stay up with the trends.
And from your experience, how often should a sales team have somebody to come in, help them re-motivate themselves, maybe look at the product, maybe look at their offering to help them?
I suppose it depends really on the business, but I would say once a year, maybe once every 2 years, something like that, depending on the industry. But definitely regular updates.
Wow, I must say, this has all been very, very fascinating, and I think our listeners will get great joy out of that. Okay, I suppose that's all we've time for today. A special thanks to our guest, Caroline Courtney of Smart Sales Hub, for coming into the You and Your Business studio today. Thanks to our sound engineer. And don't forget that you can contact the show by emailing your business at dublincityfm.ie with your comments and suggestions. The podcast of today's show will be available soon. Thank you for your company, and please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 12:30, right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM for another edition of You and Your Business.